The state of Texas will be host to one of the more competitive Senate races of the 2024 election cycle between Ted Cruz and Colin Allred, the Democrat. Interestingly enough, there's no third-party candidate in this race, so it really is going to be a 1v1 in the state of Texas. And I think it's pretty important to look at this state because it's changed so much demographically and politically over the past 20 years, and it's sort of a competitive race in the sense that Republicans certainly have the advantage, but this race isn't necessarily safe for the GOP by any means. So that's why we're going to spend this video talking about the Senate race and analyzing how this is likely to pan out in November of 2024. But of course, before we begin, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. So Ted Cruz isn't exactly the most popular incumbent senator. His approvals have gotten better. As of February 2024, his approval stands at 48% and his disapproval at 39%. So far in decent standing. But again, he's not the most popular of incumbent senators. Somebody like John Cornyn, the other senator from Texas, is significantly more popular, and that's of course reflected in his much larger election victory in 2020 as opposed to the pretty narrow re-election victory of Ted Cruz back in 2018. So 48 to 39 is pretty good for Ted Cruz. That's the best he's been really since 2019. Interestingly enough, he had a spike in approval after the 2018 midterms, and even during the 2018 midterms, he was at 47-42, and of course we saw that being around a 3-point margin of victory. So the fact that he's about 9 points above water is pretty good for his re-election prospects as of right now. But again, Texas, as we've talked about, is a rapidly changing state. Democrats have continued to gain in the state, both margin-wise when it comes to fundraising, and it's really put Republicans on the defense. Now, so far, Republicans have done a very good job. No Democrat has won statewide in the state of Texas since 1994. So throughout the entire 21st century, Republicans have dominated every statewide office in Texas. So pretty good track record so far, but again, this 2024 race, I think, is going to be heavily indicated by how well Donald Trump does in the state of Texas. If we go back to 2020, for instance, Donald Trump won Texas by just 5.6%. This is the smallest margin any Republican has won the state of Texas in a presidential race since Bob Dole in 1996, which is about 5 points. So Texas is by no means a safe Republican state when it comes to presidential races. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, very different story. Mitt Romney was able to win the state of Texas by 15 points, a very comfortable margin of victory by well over 1 million votes. So that really wasn't in contention. But Texas nowadays is a much different state. You've seen massive population growth in the Dallas-Fort Worth area as well as the Austin area. And this has resulted in a lot more voters moving to this area and voting more Democratic. And it really makes sense when you think about what industries are coming here. Tech being a big one, electric vehicles with Tesla, etc., etc. These are very Democratic industries overall, and they attract younger people, which tend to vote more Democratic. This is especially the case in the Austin area. Now, one of the good things for Republicans is that the Austin area, population-wise, is not nearly as big as Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, for example. But nonetheless, it is a big population center that has been rapidly zooming towards the left. For example, Joe Biden got 72% of the vote about in Travis County when compared to Barack Obama getting just 60% of the vote. And of course, Republican Mitt Romney got 36% of the vote in Travis County as opposed to Donald Trump getting just 26%. So about 10 points in either direction. So a pretty significant swing for Democrats overall, and there's really nothing indicating that these trends in the urban parts of Texas are going to change anytime soon. They basically mirror the trends we've been seeing around the country in urban and suburban areas where Democrats continue to build on their margins. And as a result, because Texas is such a suburban state overall when it comes to its population, again, most of the Lone Star State's population lives in either Dallas, Fort Worth, the Houston metro, Austin, San Antonio, or El Paso. There's not that many people living in these sort of rural to ex-urban parts of the state. Even if the exurbs are a bit more populated in Texas than in other places, the bulk of the population lives in these metro areas. So if Republicans want to make Texas more of a solidified Republican stronghold, they need to make improvements in these metro areas. And Ted Cruz has a pretty bad track record in these areas. We can go back to 2018, for instance. This is the closest Texas has ever been to flipping to a Democrat in the 21st century. And you see just absolutely massive margins for Democrats. A 2-to-1 margin in Dallas County, winning Fort Worth, Tarrant County, which is previously was one of the most conservative urban areas in the entire country. Harris County being a 17-point margin, Travis County 74-24, so nearly a 3/4 margin for Democrats, so on and so forth. So this was almost the perfect storm for Democrats to win the state. Ted Cruz wasn't exactly super popular. Beto O'Rourke was this young, charismatic candidate that really energized Democratic voters in the state. And this close race had down ballot consequences. If we take a look at the statewide races in Texas overall, besides governor, you look at lieutenant governor, only a 5-point margin for Dan Patrick. Attorney General, a 3-point margin for Ken Paxton, so on and so forth. So all the statewide races were made significantly closer because of how close Beto O'Rourke made this race. Now in 2024, things are a little bit different. Joe Biden, a Democrat, is the incumbent president. He's very, very unpopular in the state of Texas. And Colin Allred is not exactly the young, charismatic, dark horse candidate that Beto O'Rourke was. He's a congressman from the Dallas area, and that really doesn't carry that much weight. This isn't exactly the type of candidate that's going to flip the state of Texas, even if the state overall is moving towards the left. Colin Allred, at this point in time, doesn't really have the coalition necessary to knock off somebody like Ted Cruz. He's more popular now than he was in 2018, and Joe Biden is an incumbent Democrat who's very unpopular presidentially. Now, I did mention that I think this race is also going to hinge on how well Donald Trump does in the state of Texas. I think at this point in time, he's going to win the state. It's really a question of by how much. I think you're going to see mid to low single digits. Texas is still a rapidly growing state with Democrats continually making gains in the suburbs. And, unlike a place like Florida where you've seen Latinos, Hispanics move dramatically to the right in urban, suburban, and rural areas. In Texas, you've really only seen this shift in more rural areas, the Rio Grande Valley specifically. And just because this happened in 2020 doesn't necessarily mean this is going to hold in 2024. Again, this is only a 5-point margin of victory for Donald Trump. He really can't afford to lose that much more ground in the urban areas. And, I think the saving grace for him might be that Joe Biden is so unpopular that would-be Democratic voters vote for a third-party candidate. So Donald Trump could potentially win the state of Texas by 6 or 7 points with only about 52% of the vote because Joe Biden is doing worse due to third-party candidates. But, as of right now, I think the Texas Senate race leans in Ted Cruz's direction. I think he'll probably win by a couple of points. Looking at the polls, this sort of backs up what I've been saying so far. A 6-point margin of victory for Ted Cruz, some of which have double-digit margin of victories, but I don't think those are so accurate. When you average it all together, Cruz is winning by a few points. He has the built-in advantage. The Texas GOP, for all of its flaws, I think has been very adaptable in a rapidly changing state. Texas demographically on paper should be a blue state, but it's not. Culturally it's a conservative state, and Texas Republicans seem to know what messaging works for their voters in this state. So I think ultimately Ted Cruz probably wins by a few points, 4 to 5 points as of right now. The margin for Donald Trump, I think, is up in the air. We could see a situation where Donald Trump does slightly worse than Ted Cruz at this point in time, although that I'm not too sure about. We'd have to look at polls. But we're going to talk about the presidential race in Texas later this week because Donald Trump is leading by high single digits, even low double digits, but I don't actually expect that to be the margin, and I'll explain why in that video. So at this point in time, I have Ted Cruz winning by a couple of points, and that would put Republicans at 50 seats in the Senate. Of course, if Donald Trump were to win the 2024 presidential election, his VP would be the tie-breaking vote, and that's without Montana, Ohio, or Nevada. West Virginia is an auto flip for Republicans. They're going to win that by a safe margin. And of course, with Texas and Florida held down, Republicans only need to flip one more state in order to win the Senate. And of course, Ohio and Montana are very flippable states in the 2024 environment. So anyway, that's it for today's video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any more videos I put out. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.